Okay, so welcome back. Thank you for watching my last videos. I can't wait to get to where we are today so I can tell you what's going on in my days like now. That's why I'm sort of hurrying through what got me to where I am today. Because, you know, so much is going on, it's not funny. But yeah, so anyway, I found out that both my boys had granuliocytosis. One of them had the surgery, so I got through all that, even though that was the most tragic. It was just horrible. I can't even begin to tell you what it looked like. It looked like he had been beaten to a pulp by someone, you know, your little tiny baby. So then we were still having problems with our other son's breathing. It was still, every time he'd get any kind of sickness whatsoever, which was all the time because he had no immune system, his throat would close over, and we were going in and out of the hospital, in and out of the hospital. Now by this stage it was almost physically impossible. Like, it was just consuming our lives. And his surgeon said to us that he needs a tracheotomy because his throat just can't handle it. And for those who don't know, a tracheotomy is where they put the tube through their throat, and they basically breathe, do everything through a hole in their throat, through a tube through their throat. And I said, well, what can we do? What are our chances of stopping that? Like, what can we do? And he said, tongue-in-cheek, move to a warmer climate. Now, we lived in a pretty cold, somewhere where it went, and we lived in a very old house and everything. So within 72 hours, I had packed up the 3 children and I had moved to Queensland, where my mother-in-law lived and father-in-law lived. And let's get this straight, I did not get along with my mother-in-law at all, but I had to do this for my son. So we lived up in Noosa for, I think it was just under 12 months, just long enough, and it was horrible. Like, I hated every minute of it. I hated being away from it was the wrong time. I had 2 babies that couldn't walk. I had, you know, I needed my mum and dad so bad. I needed parents, and all I had was this mother-in-law that hated my guts. And then my husband, to make it worse, had to stay behind because, well, he had to, you know, get the house ready and sell it, because I literally packed our bags and left. There was like no anything in between. So he had to stay behind for a couple of weeks and sell the house, or at least pack up the house and send it up to Queensland. So we did that, we got through that, and it was just horrible. But there were some good things about it. You know, we met, at that stage, there was a lot more, and at that, you know, stage, we got a lot more help with disabilities. So we learnt that he needed to have through the cerebral palsy, his left leg plastered for 4 months, changing the plaster every month to loosen up the spasticity in his feet so that one day he could walk. And then we learned about orthotics, and that he'd have to wear an orthotic and all that. So they did all that, and while we're in Queensland, so that was really good. That was, you know, I still say that if it wasn't for Queensland, he probably, you know, he'd be walking, but he'd be walking a lot worse than what he does now. Like, he walks with a limp, but he wouldn't be walking half as good as what he is now. And he can ride a bike, and he can, you know, run, and he can do all those sort of things. He can basically do everything, which I don't think he would be able to do if it wasn't for living in Queensland. So I remember around Christmas time, I went down to, it was just before Christmas actually, so it was probably actually around October. I I went down to Melbourne to do a shopping tour. Back in those days, you know, the schools used to run shopping tours. They were awesome. And I went down there to do one and spend some time with my mum. And I rang up my husband and I said, I don't think I can come back unless you promise me that we can move back to Melbourne. And he went, hell yes, like, let's give it a go. You know, Ali's grown heaps and, you know, let's give it a go. I think we need to give it a, you know, we can try it. So I said, because I just can't live up there anymore. Like, I need to come home. So that's what we did. I came back and we just started packing up the house. And we moved back to Melbourne again. And we moved in with my mum and dad at the beginning, and they have a really big house. So we moved in like half the house. Wasn't ideal, but it was fantastic for the time. So anyway, time went on and I'd started to notice, and then by that stage, Ella's throat had got big enough, he'd grown enough. So basically our job had been done, had worked, it had worked, for him to have his surgery. So he had his surgery and they were all ready to put him in ICU afterwards, and he came out of it fantastic, brilliant, awesome, like we couldn't believe it. And I remember my father coming to visit him, and that's big for us because my dad never really did, you know, and it was really emotional seeing him because he had such a drastic change. They did such a drastic operation that his look was completely different. Because of the different type of surgery, even though it was on his head, that they did with him. Like, Nicholas had to replace his eyes. Alistair, they focused more on the actual skull. He didn't have the swelling that Nicholas had, but he almost looked like a different child. And anyway, we put him up. We went up to the ward eventually, and he crashed. All I remember is we were sitting there with him. He was just a baby. We were sitting there with him, and all these alarms went off, and his sat started to drop. His heart rate started to drop, and we started to lose him right there and then. And in front of everybody, in front of us, all the doctors, like, they pressed the button. All the doctors, all the nurses, the crash cart came out in front of us, and there was our son being resuscitated right in front of our eyes. And we were like, holy crap. My husband went to absolute smithers, and I just stayed tight. Like, I just hung on and just thought, you know, I've got to be strong right now. So they stabilised him up in the room, and then they said, look, we're going to take him to ICU now. You can't, you know, you can't come with us. We'll let you know when he's stabilised. Those words are the hardest things ever to hear, you know. Are you ever going to see your child alive again, basically? So the next 4 or 5 days was spent in ICU with my son, our son, in a coma. So I'm going to leave it at that because I've just got home. I've just taken the kids to the orthodontist. Just found out some pretty horrible news about my son, so he's very heartbroken. Life's hard, guys. Life's hard. But you just have to keep soldiering on. You know, we are parents. We have to be soldiers. We have no choice in the matter at all. But there's some days that you just want to grab everybody that you love and keep them close to you, because you just can't handle any more sadness happening to them or stress happening to yourself or anything. So I'll leave it at that, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.